proposition for you. You tell me what you think about this. I was thinking that mindfulness is something approximating paying attention to what you're paying attention to.
You wonderful human being, welcome back to the inner church, where I make the connection between what people say, do or have and their inner voice. Forget the complicated stuff that people tell you or sometimes even lie about, and also forget all the nice pimp videos you will find on YouTube. This channel only deals with the basic stuff and raw human connections and the translation to the inner voice. Today I dive into a conversation between Jordan Peterson and Dr. Ellen Langer on mindfulness, and I reveal how this also is tied to the inner voice. We cover what is mindfulness, uncertainty and the future, the purpose of mindfulness, and why attention and mindfulness are the most important things in life according to this conversation, and human limitations and suffering. So let's go.
Your new book today, The Mindful Body, Thinking Our Way to Chronic Health. And you know, we were colleagues back in the 1990s. I suppose we still are colleagues in some ways.
That's right.
And I was thinking about mindfulness again. And I have a proposition for you, and you tell me what you think about this. I was thinking that mindfulness is something approximating paying attention to what you're paying attention to. But I'm open for definitions.
Okay. No. I like that. But the way I've defined it is actively noticing. That if you, people give people instructions and say, pay attention, be present, and that's sweet, but it really falls on deaf ears because when people are not there, they don't know they're not there. And all of the research we've done over 40 years says most of us, most of the time, are mindless. So to be mindful, you can do one of two things. The one most, the easiest for people is probably just to notice new things about the things you thought you knew. And then you come to see you didn't know them as well as you thought you did, and then your attention naturally goes to them. The other is to adopt a mindset, the only mindset we should have, for uncertainty. People don't realize that everything is always changing. Everything looks different from different perspectives, so we can never know. And if you know you don't know, then you naturally stay tuned in. If you thought you knew what I was going to say next, why listen to me?
So they talk about mindfulness, a term that has gained significant popularity in recent years. It's a fascinating concept rooted in ancient practices. It's all about being fully present in the moment and developing a heightened awareness of your thoughts, feelings and surroundings. But where did this idea come from, and what does modern research have to say about it? Mindfulness can be traced back to the Buddhist traditions, where it was an integral part of meditation practices over 2,500 years ago. It was used to cultivate a deep understanding of the mind and promote inner peace. Fast forward to the 20th century and mindfulness began to gain attention in the Western world, thanks in part to figures like Jon Kabat-Zinn, who developed the mindfulness-based stress reduction program in the late 1970s. Since then, mindfulness has been the subject of extensive scientific research. Numerous studies have shown its benefits for reducing stress, improving mental health, and enhancing overall well-being. MRI scans have even revealed that mindfulness can lead to changes in the brain associated with improved attention and emotional regulation. One remarkable study published in the Journal of Physiological Science in 2010 demonstrated that just a few weeks of mindfulness training can lead to significant improvements in working memory and cognitive flexibility. So in a nutshell, mindfulness is an ancient concept that has found its way into our modern lives, backed by an ever-growing body of scientific evidence highlighting its profound impact on our mental and emotional well-being. Okay, now let's translate this complicated stuff to the inner voice. Because when you talk about the inner voice, the only thing that matters is what is the voice inside your head saying. So when they talk about mindfulness and use very complicated words to describe that you need to be in the present, all those descriptions are just words and do not say anything. Mindfulness, in my honest opinion, is paying attention to your inner voice. So it's not about just paying attention, because paying attention doesn't mean anything. Yeah, you can say you have to pay attention to when a car drives by, that you look at the car. But what does it mean? The only thing that it does mean is paying attention what your head or the voice in your head is saying to you. For instance, watch out, there's a car, or that's a blue car. Because everything that you think is about the inner voice. The inner voice is the thing that makes you think. So they use subjective words, and in my honest opinion, it's all about the inner voice. So let's get to the next part.
It's very interesting because people don't realize that what we're always doing is trying to solve today's problems with yesterday's solutions. And so when you're taking a scale, you're assuming everything is staying still. And those people may have, if they did well on those scales, possibly do well at the job as it was defined in the past. But it's going to change. So I have a different approach to all of it, which is essentially the same thing that you're suggesting with this 90-minute interaction for students, which I think is wonderful. What you're doing is waking them up. And, when you're writing about the past where you have to write about something you never explored before, obviously you're being mindful, because the idea of being mindful is noticing new things. When you're writing about the future, because you haven't experienced the future, again, you're being mindful. And so, they should be taught just to be mindful from the start, either in your way or added to it or in place of it. And just an understanding that is very unusual, especially in schools, for people to be taught to exploit the power and uncertainty. Again, all of the schools, parents, the army, industry in general, teaches people absolutes. This is the way you do it. This is what it is. Horses don't eat meat. 1 and 1 is 2, and so on. And by teaching people that everything looks different from different perspectives, everything is always changing, uncertainty is the rule, not the exception, and you don't have to feel bad about not knowing. You should make a universal rather than a personal attribution for not knowing, because nobody knows. And not knowing is good, because then it makes everything potentially new and exciting.
Okay, let's dive into what they are talking about. But first, a message of encouragement. The only way I can grow this channel is for you to simply hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. So can you please do that now? By doing so, you enable me to explore a wide area of topics like faith, religion, Christianity, Judaism, spirituality, law of attraction, consciousness, atheism, human behavior and emotions, mindfulness, success, wealth, happiness, relationships, parenting, and even tough, provoking topics like identity politics, virtue signaling, cancel culture, diversity, gender, conspiracy theories, and politics, all through our unique inner church lens. Discover how the inner voice shapes conversations and gain the power to master your own inner voice, making your dreams a reality. Thank you, and now back to the video. So they discuss uncertainty about the future, which is a feeling we've all experienced, and it's deeply ingrained in our psychology. Let's dive into this concept from a psychological perspective and explore what both early theories and recent studies have to tell us. Early on, psychologists like Kurt Lewin recognized that people are motivated by the need to reduce uncertainty. It's a fundamental human drive. We seek predictability and control because it provides a sense of safety. Uncertainty can lead to stress and anxiety as our brains are wired to prefer known outcomes. Fast forward to today, and researchers are delving even deeper into the psychological implications of uncertainty. A study published in Nature Human Behavior in 2017 explained how our brains respond to uncertainty about the future. It found that the brain's anterior cingulate cortex plays a central role in processing uncertainty and that people vary in their tolerance for ambiguity. Moreover, recent events have highlighted the importance of understanding and coping with uncertainty. The COVID-19 pandemic, for instance, brought widespread uncertainty about health, economy, and daily life. Studies conducted during this period shed light on how individuals differ in their physiological responses to uncertainty situations. So when it comes to uncertainty about the future, it's not just passing feeling, it's deeply rooted in our psychology. Understanding how our minds grapple with uncertainty can help us navigate it more effectively, reduce stress, and make better decisions. Okay, now let's translate this complicated stuff to the inner voice. So the reason why I say it's complicated, because all the talk about uncertainty or writing about your future in the example is nothing more than you become aware of what your inner voice is telling you. If you try to write about the future, then your inner voice has to come up with some sort of story, a dialogue with yourself. So in that moment, you become present, of course, but becoming present doesn't mean anything. It's not that you're somehow in the future or otherwise in the present. No, it's that you become aware of your inner voice. So that is the key. Not all the complicated stuff they talk about. They talk about a horse or something, or the absolutes that you have been taught in school, that you learn this or learn that. No, it's about what your inner voice is telling you. If your inner voice has been told that that is a chair or that is a tree, then in your head you repeat that sentence, and the next time you see a tree, your inner voice tells yourself it's a tree. So all the things can be bring back to your inner voice. So again, let's watch a clip from the conversation, and again I will show you that they only talk about the inner voice. So again, mindfulness, the word, it's an invented word, means listening to your inner voice. And you can train to become aware of your inner voice, because most people in their life are not aware of their inner voice. They're just slaves to what people tell you is thoughts. But thoughts are basically what your inner voice is sometimes whispering in your ear. You cannot do that, or watch out for that, or I don't like her. That's your inner voice doing the talking. So let's move on to the next part.
All the time. And people say, well, aren't there circumstances where it's to your advantage to be mindless? My answer is emphatically no. And I say, let's say you're at the park and you took a 2-year-old with you. And this is the person trying to challenge me and says, now, and the 2-year-old wanders into the street. Wouldn't it be best to mindlessly just grab the child so that the child isn't hit by the oncoming car? And my response to that is twofold. The first is that if you were mindful, the child wouldn't have ended up in the street in the first place. And secondly, that probably in grabbing the child, you want to notice the posture of the driver to figure out whether they're going to turn right or left, to know if you should take the child out of harm's way going to the right or left, and so on. That The only time one should be mindless, I believe, is when you found the very best way of doing something and nothing changes. And so clearly, I don't think those conditions can be met. So mindlessness feels good. I have over 45 years of research showing that it's good for your health. It's good for your relationships. People see you as authentic, charismatic, and it even leaves its imprint on the things that we do. And given that it's so easy, I can find no reason why people wouldn't begin immediately after understanding us today to become more mindful.
So they talk about the purpose of mindfulness, and from a psychological perspective, it's to cultivate a state of awareness and presence that allows us to better understand our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. It's about learning to observe our mental processes without judgment and developing a greater sense of our control over our reactions. Moreover, mindfulness has been linked to reduce stress and anxiety. A study in the journal JAMA Internal Medicines in 2014 found that mindfulness meditation programs could improve symptoms of anxiety, depression, and pain. In essence, the purpose of mindfulness from a psychological standpoint is to enhance our mental well-being, increase our cognitive abilities, and provide us with tools to cope with the challenges of life in a more balanced and resilient way. Okay, now let's translate this complicated stuff to the inner voice. Because when you look at their conversation, they talk about an example in a park or something with a kid, and being aware of that the kid can be hit by a car or something. But what it all means is that when you sit in the park or do whatever that you do, is that you listen to what your inner voice is telling you. You can sit and just watch your kid, but then when you see something happening to your kid, your inner voice tells you to take some action based on which of the two inner voices you listen to. So if you're fearful, this means that you listen to the inner voice that controls your fear, or how we like to call it, uncertainty, insecurity. Because when you're insecure about what is going to happen, then you become fearful. So be present means looking or listening to your inner voice. And all the rest of the conversation is again about the inner voice. So also from a psychological perspective, the importance of mindfulness, that it can reduce stress, anxiety, and all those things, has all to do with your inner voice. And that's why this channel is called the Inner Church. Because when you take control of your two inner voices, the voice of insecurity and the voice of security, both are a result of, let's say, fight or flight, or happiness or sadness. Those two inner voices, what they tell you is how you live your life. So again, let's look at another part of this conversation between Jordan Peterson and Ellen Langer and see how we can translate what they're telling you about or talking about to the much easier to understand inner voice.
So the Egyptians determined that Horus, who was the god of attention, was the force that kept the evil king at bay, so destroyed the negative consequences of habit, and revitalized the social order. And they prioritized attention as the highest god. And so did the Mesopotamians. So they had a god, Marduk, who was their pinnacle god.
So, Jordan, they all beat me to the punch. So this is good to know. And the question is, why has it taken so long for cultures around the world to see the wisdom in all of this?
Well, Ellen, do you
Do
think it's partly because if you start to become mindful, there's also the possibility that you'll bring your shortcomings to mind. Like, imagine that you do start a practice of attending. As you attend, you're going to learn things about yourself that are interfering with your ability to openly attend, right? And that can be challenging. And and off-putting, because you can see, because you're wondering, well, if this is so obvious, why don't people notice it? Why don't people just automatically do it? And I do think that part of it is that when you start to pay careful attention, you find things that need to be fixed, and that calls you. Well, that's one possibility, anyways.
Well, so let me speak to that, because something that's very important to me is the idea that behavior makes sense from the actor's perspective, or else he or she wouldn't do it. And so if one were mindful, they'd be aware of why they're doing what they're doing. And it turns out that every description we have of people, ourselves or others, has an equally potent but oppositely valenced alternative. So you want to diminish me because I'm so gullible, which I am. From my perspective, I'm trusting. You drive me crazy because you're so inconsistent. From your perspective, you're flexible. You can't stand me because I'm so impulsive. That's because I value being spontaneous. So it's interesting. You'll like this as a clinician. Years ago, we did this study where we gave people about 200 of these behavior descriptions. And we said, circle those things about yourself that you want to change, but you have trouble changing. Okay, so for me, it would be gullible, impulsive, for example. Now you turn the sheet of paper over, and in a mixed up order are the positive versions of each of these. And now we ask people, circle those things about yourself you really value: trusting and spontaneous. And so as long as I value being trusting, I'm going to necessarily be gullible. As long as I value being spontaneous, people on occasion are going to see me as impulsive. And when you realize that behavior makes sense, then we don't want to change ourselves or other people in the same way. That you might be tired of me because I'm so whatever. And then when you see the positive version of it, you welcome it. And our relationship flourishes and we become less judgmental.
So they explain how important to life both attention and mindfulness are. But again, they may seem like simple concepts, but psychologists always make them complex. Let's dive into why attention and mindfulness are arguably the most important things in life from a psychological perspective. Because first, attention, our ability to focus our attention, is fundamental to nearly everything we do. It's been extensively studied in psychology, and research consistently shows that attention is a limited resource. Understanding and directing our attention can lead to increased productivity, better decision making, and improved relationships. If you want to know more about this, check The Limits of Attention by Christopher Moll. Now, mindfulness, this practice involves being fully present in the moment, and it has profound psychological benefits. As already explained, it will reduce stress, anxiety, and depression. And mindfulness allows us to observe our thoughts and emotions without judgment, enhancing self-awareness and emotional regulation. So why are attention and mindfulness crucial? They help us navigate life challenges with clarity and resilience. They empower us to make better choices, nurture our mental well-being, and connect more deeply with ourselves and others. In a world filled with distractions, mastering attention and cultivating mindfulness can be challenging. Okay, now let's translate again this complicated psychological stuff to the inner voice. So they talk about the old Egyptians and the knowledge and the importance they say that attention has. But again, attention does not mean anything. Paying attention to something, for instance, when I pay attention to me holding this cup, even if I do so, I in my head say that I'm holding this cup. So paying attention means that I pay attention to the words inside my head. There is no such thing as paying attention. Paying attention is, again, a word. And that word means that you are aware of your inner voice. And they also talk about human emotions. She gave examples about people say one thing about you and then the opposite can be true for yourself. But I do not agree with that. When you are angry or people say you are an angry person, that means that oftentimes you speak with your voice of insecurity, or you can call it the voice that makes you angry. Because when you are insecure about things, then you get a heightened sense of awareness or fear, and you can become angry about something. And the same is the opposite when you say, "No, I'm not angry." She makes some connections between that you think that you have the opposite. For instance, if you are angry, people say you're angry all the time. You say, "But I value being aware of things. I pay close attention to things and I want things to be perfect. And if they're not perfect, that's why I become angry." So in my understanding, perfectionism is a good trait. But both of those things has nothing to do with angry, perfectionism. It all has to do with your two inner voices. How you talk to yourself, what you are saying to yourself. So I'm glad to see that they see the importance of paying attention or mindfulness as one of the most important things in life, but translate this to the simple concept of your two inner voices. Let's dive into the last part of what they are talking about.
You know, we all waste an awful lot of our own time in futile pursuits and self-defeating pursuits, and we impose limitations on ourselves that are arbitrary and often lazy, and we hurt ourselves by doing that. And then collectively, we deceive each other and we lie and we don't cooperate well together and we manipulate, and that interferes with our ability to apprehend things properly and to structure our existence properly. And, you know, the wildly optimistic side of me thinks, and I do think there's reason for believing this, that if we got our act together completely, insofar as that's possible, and that might partly be by paying more attention, that there aren't any intrinsic limits that would necessarily stop us. We'd still have to figure out, for example, like, it's an open question to me, and I'm kind of curious about your attitude towards this. You know, if you could choose how long you would live, do you have any idea how long you would choose? I mean, an indefinite existence, you know, of hundreds of thousands of years, it seems to me to be like incomprehensibly dramatic and awesome, right? I mean, it's a long time. But well, 80 years seems kind of short. So
I think that, you know, it depends. What people should strive for, rather than adding more years to their life, they should be adding more life to their years. And by doing that, then you'll want to extend. You know, if today is really exciting, you look forward to tomorrow. If you're miserably depressed today, you're scared about tomorrow. And so that if we were able to create a world where people were more mindful, where people had more respect for each other by noticing people's behavior makes sense or else they wouldn't do it, I think that there'd be no reason to fear. You know, you can't imagine what life is going. I can't even imagine what life is going to be like in 50 years. And I'm assuming, which is separate from whether I'm going to be alive or not. Most people would say no, but you know, who knows? You know, AI is changing things. The iPhone changed things. The railroad changed things, and all of these. So we don't know what the big change is going to be. It could be, which planet was it? Was it Venus, where they just found ice, making space travel to wherever it was seemingly more possible. I don't know. I don't claim to have any special knowledge about what the deep future holds. So I wouldn't know how to think about it. But I do know how to think of.
You think that if you concentrated on maximizing the quality of your life, the issue of how
Now.
long that should extend would more or less solve itself as a consequence of that
exactly.
proper orientation. Yeah, that seems
I think
reasonable.
So.
Okay, so they talk about human limitations and suffering, and as you can clearly see, these are age-old topics that have fascinated psychologists for centuries. The acknowledgement of human limitations dates back to philosophers like Socrates, who famously declared, "I know that I am an intelligent because I know nothing." This recognition of our finite knowledge and abilities has paved the way for understanding human suffering. Modern psychology also delves into the complexities of human limitations and suffering. Recent studies, such as the one published in Nature Human Behavior in 2018, have shown that our brains are wired to experience suffering when it's confronted with situations beyond our own control. This can lead to anxiety, stress, and even physiological health issues. Additionally, psychologists like Viktor Frankl, in his work Man's Search for Meaning, a great book, have explored the concept of suffering and found that finding meaning and purpose in life can be a powerful tool for coping with adversity. Understanding human limitations and suffering is crucial for our mental well-being. It allows us to acknowledge our vulnerabilities and, in doing so, find ways to navigate life's challenges more effectively. Recognizing that suffering is a shared human experience can lead to greater empathy and compassion, both for ourselves and others. Okay, now let's translate also this complicated stuff to the much easier to understand inner voice. Because they talk about a lot of things, the limits, how long we live, the value of life, respect to others, and all these things, they contribute to being mindful. But again, mindfulness is about the inner voice. So, for instance, the limits we put on ourselves. Limitations are a result of what one of your two inner voices is telling you to do, or that you can do or can have. For instance, if the voice of security, the voice that is empowered and believes you can do things, tells you that you can do things, then you will do things. If your voice of security, and the reason why it's called security is because you're confident, secure about what you can do, if that voice is the leading voice in your head, then you can achieve many things. But if, on the other hand, the other voice, the voice of limitations, and we call it the voice of insecurity, tells you that you cannot do things, then you put limitations on yourself. So limitations, what they are talking about, can be easily explained by talking about, or the concept of the inner voice, the voice of security and the voice of security. And the next thing, they talk about how long you live and why it's important and how you have to think about it and the value of life. Again, it's very complicated stuff. And the only thing that matters for you is to understand your inner voice. That's why this channel is dedicated to you helping to understand how the inner voice, your inner church, is responsible for everything in your life. So thanks for watching, and until next week. In the meantime, listen to your inner voice and take control of your life.